What's going on, everyone? It is AJ here. On this episode, we sat down with Claire and Andrew from the Denver chapter of the Democratic Socialists of America. Just me and CG on this one, no bug, but I think it was a great interview. We asked Claire and Andrew about what democratic socialism is, what the Denver chapter is getting up to, what happened at the National Convention, and how people can get involved. So, if you are interested in learning more about DSA and specifically what DSA is doing here in Denver, uh, tune in.
Okay, we are so excited to have Claire and Andrew from Denver DSA here with us to answer some burning questions we have for them. Both of them are really awesome organizers that have inspired me personally quite a bit. So I really am just thrilled to have them here. So Claire is the internationalism committee chair and within Denver DSA, and Andrew is a newly elected member of DSA's national political committee, and he is also on Denver DSA steering. Welcome to the show, guys.
Hey, yeah, thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Excited to chat.
Awesome. Well, we will get right into it then. So we'll start with kind of a little foundational question. How would you define democratic socialism? And are you personally a democratic socialist? And either of you can start.
Yeah, I'll give that a shot. This is Claire, just for anyone listening. So I think to start with, we got to define socialism, right? So very briefly, socialism is about who owns the means of production. So essentially, who owns the actual stuff in the economy that generates more money. And the idea is that people, the workers, should own that. So that's my broad definition of socialism. And I think there's a ton of different ways to interpret that. And then on the democratic side, I mean, I fall pretty firmly in line with Rosa Luxemburg, who says that you can't have socialism without democracy and you can't have democracy without socialism. So there's a way in which it's a little bit redundant. But for me, it's about focusing on the elements of socialism that are about that democratic worker up ownership of those means of production. And for myself, I identify lots of different ways depending on the day. But I think that in terms of especially DSA, like it is such a broad tent and democratic socialism has so many different interpretations that I certainly identify with that.
How about you, Andrew?
No disagreements from me. I think, like, to me, democratic socialism is kind of this, like, broad-based assertion that, like, believing in a society where working people do contribute and have built most of society, and that they should ultimately be the people that like run both the economy and like the political infrastructure of it. I think just in the context of America and like looking at the history of DSA, like democratic socialism came about as kind of like a little bit flavored by anti-communism. But I don't really see either of the two as like incredibly distinctly different. I think there's on the democratic socialism side, there's often just more of a favor of trying to achieve this like massive transformation of society through a little bit more of like a reformist lens, where on the other spectrum is like, for me personally, I think reform is a part of it. But I would say I have a lot more of like revolutionary optimism that like pushes forward my politics, and I'm not the like biggest person on labels. I would take no issue with being called a democratic socialist because, like I said, I don't really see it as like distinctly different from communism. I kind of see them as like approaching how we achieve like a similar endpoint in different ways, and I just think that one will be more effective in achieving that endpoint in a much more like sustainable and like exist in the long term much longer, and less fickle in being able to be overturned by like counter-revolutionary or like right-wing actors.
Okay, thank you.
And I do think it's worth saying that all three hosts of this show are members of DSA. Bug is not here today, but she is also a member, as am I, as is Constant Gardner. But Andrew, you were touching on this a little bit in your response. I was wondering if you guys could give us a brief overview of kind of the history of DSA and the founding of the Denver DSA chapter specifically, because I myself, I said I'm a member. I've been involved to varying degrees over the past, I think, 6 years is how long I've been like a card-carrying member, but I myself don't actually know too much of the history of DSA itself. So I was wondering if you could speak to that.
Yeah, I probably can't give like the like best historical context for DSA, but DSA kind of formed out of the like merger of two different organizations. I think back in like the 70s or 80s, like I mentioned, like DSA's founding did like have like specific anti-communist sentiment to it, but a lot of that was like given the context and time at which DSA formed. We've grown substantially over the years. Obviously, like the Bernie running for office and like being attached to DSA is a big degree to what drew DSA's attention. And then obviously the disillusionment of many young people just living and existing under the like current conditions ever since probably for me personally, it's like the Obama administration is where a lot of things went wrong, because that's when I was just like coming of age as a teenager. A lot of people looking for like a political alternative and a home to like organize for a better world, seeing that we're not going to really achieve anything through the Democratic Party. And as far as Denver DSA goes, Denver DSA was founded back, I believe, in like 2017. Me personally, I got involved in like 2021 after I graduated college, and kind of grew out of the Bernie campaign in the wake of 2016. Obviously, Bernie didn't get elected, but many of the people that were involved were like involved on Bernie's campaign and were like looking to create like a political organism in the like Denver metro to continue to organize along the lines of a lot of what the Bernie's campaign was trying to achieve. And ultimately, we do have to build a base of power in our communities to be able to organize for the like better world that we all know is possible. So that's how Denver DSA started. Like I said, I've been involved since 2021. I've primarily led a lot of the internationalists and Palestine solidarity organizing that has grown out of Denver DSA, which Denver DSA has been a huge part in like thrusting forward that organizing in the Denver metro more broadly.
Yeah, I think that's a really good overview. I just went and looked at the Wikipedia to remember what the two organizations were. So it's the Democratic Socialist Organizing Committee and the New American Movement. And this is all kind of an extension of what was called the New Left, which is kind of like a post-Red Scare reimagining of the left wing. And to Andrew's point, a lot of it was pretty like reluctant to use the word, communism, trying pretty hard to differentiate themselves from other leftists. And I think the really key thing in the history of DSA at a national level is that there really are two totally distinct organizations that share the same name before and after the Bernie Sanders campaign in 2016. And so Denver, I don't think ever, maybe back in like the 80s or 90s had like an OG DSA chapter. But the current iteration of both the national organization and certainly the Denver chapter are very much post Bernie Sanders formations. And I think like the organization now is certainly much, much friendlier to, and in large part run by people who are able and willing to say the word communist. Basically just that like the DSA of yesteryear was like kind of a milquetoast social democrat, also explicitly Zionist organization, which is extremely not the case now. And especially after some of the recent stuff at the National Convention, which I know we'll talk about later.
Okay, awesome. So you guys kind of touched a little bit on what I'm going to ask in the next question. Andrew already mentioned being in DSA since 2021. Claire, how long have you been a Denver DSA member? And can you guys both tell us a little bit about how DSA National and Denver DSA have evolved during your time in the organization?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been a card-carrying member. Technically, I don't think they ever actually mailed me a card since 2018. I was part of the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez wave. And DSA was really, really instrumental in me like gaining political consciousness. Not to get into like a whole biography, but like pretty much I was raised as like a Daily Show liberal, had lots of opinions that I still hold, but they weren't really connected by anything. So, I knew like abortion was important and I knew that gay marriage was important, but they were all kind of these diffuse, moralized issues. And joining DSA and watching the many contradictions of the Trump administration really gave me like the substrate to link all of these things together and to identify myself as a socialist and a communist. And then in terms of how they've evolved alongside my own evolution since that time, I really think that pretty much across every issue, DSA, both nationally and in Denver, have been moving to the left, which is what I think should be happening. I think that as the working class broadly becomes more and more and more conscious of the like insane contradictions of living in this late stage of capitalism, DSA has especially in Denver stayed out in front of that, and I think there's always a risk of tailing the masses, so to speak. And I think that Denver in particular does a really good job of staying out in front. So, like we were already, by the time it came time to make a statement about October 7th, for example, DSA Denver was prepared to unanimously pass a like very strong statement in support of Palestinians' right to resistance and the rest of the resistance, like al-Thawabit, like principles, because that work had already been done and we weren't like reacting to that moment, just as an example of where Denver DSA tends to lie.
Okay, awesome. So I believe that you both attended the National Convention in August of this year. Andrew, could you tell us, well, us and our listeners who might not know, what the National Convention is, and what were some of the key takeaways from this year's convention?
Yeah, so as a democratic organization, we practice democracy in like our internal infrastructure a lot. DSA convention specifically is like the highest authority-making body in the Democratic Socialists of America. Every 2 years, we have a convention where delegates from across the country, whether they be in chapters or they're at-large members who aren't a part of a chapter, are elected to go to convention to vote on the like priorities. Sometimes it's structural reforms. Sometimes it's passing political priorities or a platform for DSA to really chart the like vision of the organization and the like future that we're striving towards over the course of the next 2 years. It's also where we elect pretty much like what people would consider our executive board, the National Political Committee. The National Political Committee is who like gives guidance to DSA in between conventions. But like I said, convention is the highest decision-making body, and so really the NPC is just doing the like groundwork that is necessary to fulfill the mandate that came out of convention. This past convention was a bit of a change from recent conventions, and I would say to some degree like a watershed moment in changing the like history of DSA, and that in the past conventions in 2017, DSA had like announced its support for the boycott, divest, and sanctions movement, which was like a pretty big departure from the like Michael Harrington's DSA being founded along the lines of the principle of like supporting Israel and Israel's right to exist being like a part of the founding political ideology of DSA. In this past convention, the 2025 convention, I was a part of a group called the Springs of Revolution that had been a part of pushing a chapter-wide effort for chapters to pass an anti-Zionist resolution to affirm our solidarity and commitment to anti-Zionist organizing, and more broadly solidarity with Palestine organizing. That was because in the 2023 convention we hadn't gotten the anti-Zionist resolution over the line, and it wasn't heard at that convention. And more frustrating things that kind of set back Palestine solidarity organizing happened in 2023. And so really we saw left convention seeing that the group of people at a convention that passed the anti-Zionist resolution hold Palestine organizing as our compass, because we definitely see it as a litmus test for politicians and their willingness to actually fulfill the agenda, as radical as it may be, how they will actually fulfill it, Palestine being the compass that will free us all, because it has really exposed a lot of contradictions within capitalism, imperialism, etc. So we were able to pass that resolution at this past convention. So that's one of the mandates that DSA is now affirmatively the largest socialist anti-Zionist organization in the country. And I've been a part of that history, and that built that presence in specific ideological position within my chapter, having started a Palestine coalition back in 2021 and doing that organizing work to really cement that position and framework for people understanding that a lot of the work, so much of the world we want happens under the pretext of us doing the necessary solidarity organizing to free Palestine.
Awesome. I've heard the National Convention described as paradise for people who really love Robert's Rules of Order. Claire, was that your experience at National? What was it like for you?
It really depended on who was presiding as chair, how much it was pleasant as a Robert's Rules sicko. But no, if you like motions and seconds and amendments and that sort of thing, it is a lot of that. I think someone ran an analysis, and I think that almost a third of the motions on the floor were procedural, call to vote, move the question, change the agenda, whatever. So people love that stuff. And yeah, I think ultimately it's all pretty well in service of a really broad democratic conversation, though. I think, if you want to have 1,200 people in a room making decisions, it's going to be pretty tough without some rules agreed upon. And actually, one of the things that I took home that was really interesting in terms of the really, big tent, multi-tendency aspects of DSA, all of the chairs that everybody across the spectrum most appreciated were from the Libertarian Socialist Caucus, which is our anarchists. And I've been thinking a lot about what that says about the relationship between anarchy and rules, and how you have to understand rules in order to consent to them and stuff like that. But yes, when the chairs were good, it was running really smooth. And then, yeah, I think just in terms of the original question, the big, huge take homes for me, especially from, coming from sort of the left wing of DSA, and also the Springs of Revolution cohort, the anti-Zionist resolution was the reason I went to convention. If that had not passed, it would have been extremely devastating, especially after already having not even been brought to a vote in the previous convention. So that was a really huge win, and I'm really, really excited to see how much changes about the way that we organize in solidarity with Palestine nationally, and to some extent that is actually following Denver. There were, I think by the time it passed, there were 90 or something chapters that had already passed their own local anti-Zionist resolutions. And Denver was among those, and a lot of the language from Denver's ended up in the national version because we kept it tight. There's also the other big, huge take homes were that the NPC, I think Andrew mentioned, has a left bloc majority, which is a pretty huge change. It's literally only one seat, so it's a pretty razor thin margin, but it's going to make, I think, a pretty big difference in some of the the between convention decision making. And one other thing I want to make sure to highlight that's especially important in the moment that we're living in nationally is that one of the other Springs of Revolution resolutions, which was about fighting ICE and building some of the infrastructure required to fight ICE at the national level, not only did it passed on what's called the consent agenda, which is basically stuff that is so well supported by such a broad base of the convention delegation that they package it all up so that we don't debate each thing individually and waste time. So just overwhelmingly popular, passed by much more than a supermajority. So the dedication for people to meet the moment with respect to immigration defense is really inspiring.
Yeah, so it was a big TLDR. It was a big, big win for the left flank of DSA, right? That, the org got pushed very, what am I trying to say? It got pushed to the left. We'll just leave it at that. And almost like more than we were even hoping that it would. Like it was a big old win, was my understanding. Anyway. So yeah, okay. Well, speaking of moving to the left, this one's for you, Claire. So DSA in general, just like among leftists, has kind of a reputation of being pretty libbed up and overly focused on electoralism. So do you think that reputation is deserved? And can you speak a little bit more to that?
Yeah, no, this is a really important question, and I appreciate you asking it this way. I think the reputation is deserved in some ways, and I'd also very much like to see it change, and I think it deserves to be changed, which is a bit of a cop-out answer, but I'm going to provide context. So basically, I think there's sort of two things going on here. First and foremost, electoralism is like the most visible form of politics in this country, which is bad, and it's like a real material consequence of the entrenchment of, two bourgeois parties in a pitched system. And so there is a way in which any organization that participates in electoralism is going to seem really intensely focused on that because it's the most visible work. And so, I mean, certainly speaking from Denver, it's not even, I don't think it's even in the top half of active committees right now in terms of membership and frequent meetings. It's obviously a really important part of, I think, basically any political organization is going to be having some kind of electoral strategy. But it is not actually as much of a priority as it appears because of how obsessed with the with the sort of, what's the word? Non-participatory, observer status of electoralism is almost like a sport. And so I think that's part of why that reputation is. And then I think part of it is because of the history, right? DSA comes out of the 80s, out of this kind of, mealy-mouthed, we're not real communists, but we're kind of socialist thing. And I think that's a reputation that we are shaking off pretty rapidly. And I think I only hope to see more of that. And so I think the DSA that you're seeing in the street or online or whatever in your city is much less liberal than you think it is. I can almost guarantee it. And if you aren't interested in electoralism, there is a ton of other work going on. It may even be more than half of the work that's happening, depending on what part of the country you're in. Certainly in Denver, that's the case. And so if you're interested in labor organizing, just go straight to the labor committee and do the organizing there. If you're interested in housing justice organizing or in international organizing, obviously I have a hope that folks will come out to the internationalism committee. That work is already happening. And I think that the more that people who are already part of the left and not sort of sliding in off of a Bernie AOC social democrat space, who do come to DSA and do your work that you're already doing or that you're imagining in DSA, that will only help dispel some of that, which is like I say, kind of half myth and half reality. But I think less and less the reality every year.
Awesome. That definitely tracks with my experience in DSA as well. It is less lived up than it might seem.
And speaking of, you guys both mentioned the Springs of Revolution movement. I was wondering if y'all could tell us a little bit more about that, tell our listeners what that is, and also speak to our local Rocky Mountain Revolution movement. Andrew, would you be able to speak to those questions?
Yeah, absolutely. The Springs Revolution, if people are familiar with DSA or not familiar with DSA, there's a lot of like internal politics that happens. There are like caucuses that represent a bunch of different political ideologies or tendencies within the organization. The Springs of Revolution really kind of grew out of like this push for DSA taking like a much more hard line on in support of anti-Zionism from the 2023 convention. Namely, a comrade and dear friend of mine who was a chair in Denver DSA, along with Claire. He was elected to the NPC on this on like an anti-Zionist slate, and many of us like worked to support him while he was on the NPC. And then 2 years goes by really fast, and we started talking about priorities, and just due to the nature of organically organizing with chapters all across the country on Palestine solidarity, because shortly after the 2023 convention, Alaska flood happened, and chapters across the country were mobilizing to support Palestine. And not as many chapters were fortunate to have, and not as many organizers as well. Were not as fortunate to have like an already solidified Palestine coalition in their area, like Denver, Connecticut. Those were some areas where like Palestine coalitions had been formed and already been doing that organizing, understanding like Palestine being a like central compass to guide socialist organizing in the U.S. So a lot of people were coming to Ahmed, and chapters like Denver and organizers coming to chapters like Denver looking for like guidance of like how do we engage and show our support and solidarity in the like early months after the wake of the Alaska flood. And through that, like I mentioned, organically campaigns came out of that, like the Uncommitted and No Votes for Genocide, and organizers in DSA just kind of got connected to myself, Ahmed, and we're also members of the Palestine Solidarity Working Group, who has been like leading a campaign called No Appetite for Apartheid, and connecting like local communities with the BDS movement by doing like community-centered agricultural and food product boycotts. So naturally, a lot of those connections fomented. People got more interested in organizing and working with our small little group, and then we started looking at convention for political priorities, and we came up with a name. But I would pretty much say that Springs of Revolution, I view it personally like we always say, we're not a caucus. It's very much like a left-wing unity organizing network. We have people that support like kind of the core and Springs of Revolution that are from caucuses like Emerge, Libertarian Socialist Caucus. There's some at Red Star, Mug. I think those are the main ones. We always joke that when we do interviews like this, we always forget about LSC, so I wanted to make sure to include them. But yeah, we very much like saw what other caucuses tendencies were introducing for a convention, and saw like what interventions that we could make. Obviously, we are the ones that have been leading Palestine Solidarity organizing in DSA. So we like pushed the lines this year of getting DSA to adopt Al-Thlabit, which is more kind of commonly referred to as the Palestinian Red Lines, which kind of expands beyond what the BDS movement calls for, and also demarcates like support for armed resistance, which amongst like Palestinian civil society, like armed resistance is like highly valued as one of like the foremost means that they can resist the Zionist entity. So Springs of Revolution kind of just naturally grew to find like gaps that DSA wasn't filling, and that we saw we needed to fill, because all of us are very much like very dedicated, principled anti-imperialist organizers. And so that's pretty much it. And then for Rocky Mountain Revolution, that's like exists within Denver related to convention. Similarly, like convention was coming. Myself, Claire, and others haven't been involved with Springs of Revolution, like writing and being involved with like the 5 resolutions that we wrote for convention, which if people are interested in learning about more of what SOR brought to convention and like what we organize along, our website is just sordsa.org. But Rocky Mountain Revolution is very much just kind of in a local extension of Springs of Revolution, having kind of like the shared principles of unity around like Palestine being the compass for our organizing and like very like principled electoral work, as well as anti-imperialism being like our core modality that we organize around as well. And it's not necessarily like a new thing. It's just more like it has a name to it now. There's been like a loose group of organizers within Denver DSA that has been organizing around a lot of this stuff for years. Like I mentioned, our involvement with starting like a local Palestine coalition can be traced back to like 2021. So there had been like a loose group of organizers, and now there's more and more people that have come to Denver because in the wake of October 7th, like Claire mentioned, Denver DSA put out a statement that we would probably look at now as just like not going far enough in rhetoric of like it could certainly stand much more firmly in solidarity with Palestine, but at the point in time in the wake of October 7th, a lot of like electeds that were DSA members condemned us for it and like left Denver DSA, but it actually resulted in Denver DSA becoming one of like the fastest growing chapters. Like a lot of people were looking for a home to organize around Palestine, in that they themselves weren't like Palestinian and weren't connected to the community. So like we welcomed so many people because of the like work we were doing to shut down the Jewish National Fund, which is like one of the oldest Zionist organizations. They were visiting Colorado, and we had a whole campaign about making sure like they were not welcome in Denver and educating people about it. So Denver DSA became like a welcoming home, and through that, like our internationalism committee, when I handed over to Claire, has just kind of like blossomed and taken on a bunch of work. And now we have like a Cuba Solidarity Coalition that is growing out of our local internationalism coalition. So just really trying to push forward on the front lines of anti-imperialism, because I personally see that as like the biggest contradiction and really just like a threat to not only everyone's lives in the United States as the imperial boomerang comes back around to attack us, but also to like self-determination of people across the globe.
Yeah, very well said.
Yeah,
I
love it.
I was just going to tag in one additional thing. Sorry for jumping in there. Just that I think it's really easy to balk at seeing like formations within formations, right? Like, oh, there's already DSA. Aren't we all comrades? And the answer is, of course, yes. And the thing I just want to highlight about both Springs of Revolution and Rocky Mountain Revolution is that they enable conversations that are explicitly political. Because I think we need more practice inside the left with disagreement, right? Like, you know, the joke about leftists is always that like, while the right is always able to just like unite under some stupid evil banner and march, the left is always like infighting so much that we can't, you know, get over it. And I think like having explicit political lines within our own house, so to speak, is like a pretty good antidote to that, because it makes it really clear which distinctions are political and which are personal. And I think like being able to focus on the distinctions that are political really helps us all sharpen our own lines and helps us address the dialectical conflicts within our own analysis. And so that is like one of the things that I've been seeing locally and nationally with both Springs of Revolution and the local kind of Rocky Mountain Revolution is just like a dedication to having like explicitly political disagreements that enable us then to know what the lines are around the united front and then unite once we get outside the house and have to go fight the real enemy.
Yes, ye old leftist infighting. We've definitely talked quite a bit about that on this show. And I personally said after the Charlie Kirk assassination that I don't want to hear ever again that the right, works so well together. Cause like last I checked, we weren't, assassinating each other on live TV. And I just want to say that that is when I joined DSA, was during or shortly after the JNF protests, because I was really passionate about Palestinian solidarity and didn't really know how to get more involved. And I saw DSA really active in those JNF protests. And that was what motivated me to join. So yay. It all comes together. We love to see it. And I do think it is an important call out that, Denver DSA did not, Palestinian solidarity did not start in Denver DSA on October 8th, that the organization was, out here, showing solidarity with Palestinians for years prior. So, we can pat ourselves on the back a little bit for that, I think, because I think not a lot of people on the left necessarily know that. Yeah. So thank you both so much for that. So the next question is, because it's called the Democratic Socialists of America, I think a lot of people think that it is for, like, you have to be a Democratic Socialist to join, and that DSA is basically all Democratic Socialists and or Bernie bros. So my question is, who should join Denver DSA and why? And do you have to be a card-carrying Bernie bro to be a member?
No, I don't think you should. I don't think anyone should be a Bernie bro anymore. I think we should all stop being Bernie bros. As a former like Bernie girl, like we can't be doing this anymore. No, and I think that's like a really important way to frame the question, right? We owe a great deal, both the left broadly and DSA specifically, to Bernie Sanders, right? Like, the organization before 2016 is unrecognizable to the organization that exists now. And like, just being able to say the word socialist out loud has led to being able to say the word communist out loud, right? Like, that's how these line struggles nationally work. And so, like, tip of the hat to Bernie for that, but also he's been a lifelong labor Zionist, and there's no excuse for that, and we don't have to pretend that we support it. Like, it's totally cool that he was the first senator to finally say genocide, but it was 2 years, and it's absurd. So no, not only do I think that you shouldn't like have to be a Bernie bro to join Denver DSA, I don't think you should be a Bernie bro at all for any reason. And then, yeah, as far as like who it's for, I would really like to see more and more people who already identify as leftists. I think the stereotype, I essentially am the stereotype of a person who joins DSA, right? Like, I was really frustrated about Trump. I was really frustrated about certainly Obama's foreign policy and what little I understood about it. And like, I joined the organization that was backing AOC, and that was kind of what started giving me the ability to like wake up to, I as an example, the words non-electoral organizing or non-electoral politics were completely foreign to me until that point. Like, I didn't even know that was an option, right? Like, the amount so I like really owe DSA for that, and I'm grateful for it. And so I think, like, if that's your path and you're kind of like a social democrat or whatever, you just want to see Medicare for all, like, definitely join DSA. We'll totally help you learn about why there's more to life than that. But I think at this stage in our development, it's really time for people who are already lined up to join. I think we've got Marxist-Leninists, we have Marxist-Leninist Maoists, we have just Maoists, we have probably some Trots somewhere. We certainly have a great deal of, some of my closest comrades are anarchists, and there's just people from all across the left, and like, DSA is the place to be. It is the largest socialist organization that's ever existed in this country, and if you believe in a mass socialist politics, that's kind of where you have to start from. And as someone who's a pretty hardliner these days, especially on Palestine, especially on police and prison abolition, like, DSA is a very, very comfortable place to be, especially in Denver. So I would encourage people who think of themselves as too left for DSA, come to a couple meetings, come find your people. It might not be the electoral committee. It might not be whatever committee. Though certainly, I do believe in electoral. I don't believe in leaving any guns in the barrel, so to speak. But like, there are people doing the work that you want to do in Denver DSA.
I would just add to that and say, like, you don't even necessarily have to hold like a certain identity. I think if you have like a willingness to like open-mindedness and curiosity of like the better world that can be possible through abolishing capitalism, and like just having a desire to live in a much more humane world, like that is more than enough for you to join DSA. That's like a big reason why I joined DSA. I grew up in rural Wisconsin, poor. I went. I didn't like join through the like framework of like Bernie, AOC, or anything like that. Like, yes, being familiar with Bernie's campaign like did expose me to like policy that could like alleviate some of the like dire conditions we face in the United States with like student debt and the lack of healthcare, things like that. But for me, it was like a life of lived experience where like I watched people in my hometown of rural Wisconsin get shipped overseas to fight in foreign wars, to kill people for like no apparent reason other than we found out oil. As well as like watching multiple family members sustain like life-changing injuries in their workplace. And like for me, it was like I'm really fucking stubborn, and that I believe that I do not exist in the whole context of like the situation to just like sit and suffer. Like the world has to be better, and if like by the force of God, if I have to like organize to make it better, I wanted to find a place to do that, because I don't think we just exist on this like dumb little rock for like people we don't know to just like have to toil and suffer in like destitute conditions. Like we all deserve to live a dignified life. And I'm like very happy to commit like a significant portion of my time in life to trying to like build that with people. And through that, I've been able to build community. Like when I first moved to Colorado, I didn't really have many friends. I went to school full-time, worked full-time, but joining DSA, I've met lifelong friends that like, and comrades that if I got a call from one of them, like right now, and they said, "Hey, Andrew, I need you to meet me at this address," I'd be like, "Hey guys, I got to hop off and like go help them." Like that is the bond that I want to see many more people have with people in their community, and also like look at people on the other side of the globe in a similar lens as being able to have human dignity. And I've like found DSA to be that space to open myself up to be willing to be challenged on like preconceived notions I have of like how society should be structured, and how we can all like come together to build like a much better world. And I'll just add, if you're a cop or Zionist, stay the fuck out of DSA, because those are the two criteria that we actually don't allow.
Also racists, landlords, homophobes, misogynists. But yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that was really beautifully said, Andrew. I really appreciate that. And it just reminded me that I want to say, like, I got arrested on like a curfew charge during the George Floyd protests in 2020. And like, it wasn't my family who bailed me out. It was my comrades in DSA. Like those bonds that are formed in the foxholes we end up in are really, really profound. And so especially if you're someone who's like feeling the way that Andrew described about the world and feeling that it's like just kind of a place to suffer, like you're not alone in that. And a lot of the people that you can help alleviate some of that suffering with are here in Denver DSA.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I'll just speak briefly here to my own experience with it. I think joining DSA has been great for, my own building community among people who are like-minded, because I know before I joined Denver DSA, I felt often pretty crazy for feeling so outside of the mainstream of, contemporary political discourse. And just to echo what y'all were both saying, that there are a lot of people out there who share kind of, the baseline value that a better world is possible. So thank you both so much for that answer. Claire, you mentioned in one of your previous answers about non-electoral politics, and how, DSA gets involved in that arena so much. What kind of work is Denver DSA involved in right now, and what are you personally most excited about?
Yeah, I mean, so much. At any given time at this point, I mean, like when I joined, there would be 3 or 4 campaigns going. There were like 4 active committees, and they'd be each kind of doing 1 or 2 things at a time. And now it's like, I'm not going to be able to give a comprehensive list. We have like every monthly general meeting, we have like a section that talks about, what each committee is doing and what each working group is doing. And it takes like 20 minutes now just to list out what's happening and make sure people know how to get involved. So yeah, we have a whole host of different committees. Our Housing Justice Committee manages our relationship with the Colorado Homes for All Coalition. They're doing a bunch of really important work also with Denver Metro Tenants Union. And I'm sure there are other campaigns I don't even know about from there. Labor Committee has been showing up at the Starbucks pickets, and obviously every other strike that happens around town, the recent like Safeway and King Soopers strikes and so forth. And electoral committee is always cooking up different legislative campaigns. One thing I really want to call out around electoral work, especially if folks are, burned out or critical of that, some of it is oppositional, right? Like one of DSA's most successful electoral campaigns was actually run out of our abolition working group, and it was the No on 303 campaign. So Proposition 303, I think this was in 2022. Was basically it was called Let's Do Better Denver. And it was basically just a way to make the camping ban even more brutal. It was really, really heinous. But the like money behind it was really strong, and the propaganda behind it was really strong. And Denver DSA led a very scrappy coalition to fight just to defeat that ballot initiative. And it was successful. And it was like a huge coalitional effort. It involved lots of different organizations and lots of like members new and old. And so like, there are even within the electoral politics realm, there's lots of ground to cover. And then obviously I am partial to the internationalist work. It's what I think, particularly since October 7th, but really forever, like socialism has to stay international. Otherwise it becomes something approaching national socialism, which obviously we know how that goes. And so I think focusing on internationalism has been really great for me. Personally, I think it gives you like a much better horizon around what's possible and where the change is going to come from. And it's our responsibility as people who live, benefiting from the belly of the horrible imperial beast. So yeah, in terms of Internationalism Committee, we have our chapter's priority campaign, which is Palantir out of Denver. Palantir is a horrible tech bro surveillance company that's like nested to the hilt with ICE and with the federal government generally, and is basically just doing massive amounts of data aggregation as well as like, this fake AI crap and facial recognition technology. Like they're helping the IDF target missiles. They're helping ICE decide which children to harass after school to get at their parents. Like it's very, very horrible. And they're headquartered here in Denver. So we have a campaign to try to kick them out. We also, most of our immigration solidarity work is hosted in the Internationalism Committee. We we collaborate with CIRC. We also, actually in, I think either 1 or 2 weeks, I think a week from tomorrow, we are hosting one of the weekly rallies for Jeanette Vizquera, who's a longtime Denver immigrant rights activist who's been held in GEO since, I think, February. And so, making sure to show up for those and help support the community there, and also to make sure that people are plugged into the local ICE Rapid Response Network. Andrew alluded earlier to, we have a lot of Cuba solidarity work going on. And we've had a couple different delegations go to Cuba themselves, bringing medical supplies and school supplies as well. And obviously like solidarity to exchange knowledge, contacts, information with folks in Cuba doing important work there. And there's also a Cuba Solidarity organization that's spinning up with a lot of DSA involvement. And as Andrew mentioned, the focus of Internationalism Committee is solidarity with Palestine. And like in Springs of Revolution, we always say Palestine is our compass. And I think whatever your stripe of leftism is, I definitely encourage you to hold Palestine as your North Star as you figure out whatever kind of organizing you do. And so in terms of Palestinian solidarity, we work really closely with the organization that DSA helped found alongside some other really important groups, the Colorado Palestine Coalition. If you have been at a demonstration of any kind in the last 2 to 3 years for Palestine, it was probably hosted by the CPC. So our our internationalism committee is where we coordinate there. And then we also have our local No Appetite for Apartheid campaign, which is basically a like food and grocery focused arm of the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement. It's been really successful. We're pulling in new restaurants that are committing to not use apartheid ingredients and not sell apartheid sodas. Don't buy Coke or Sabra is at least the bare minimum of No Appetite for Apartheid, and it gets much more detailed from there. And so, yeah, like tons and tons of great work. And I probably only got like half of the going campaigns in Denver DSA. So definitely come check us out. DenverDSA.org/events is like our calendar. A lot of the events are open to the public. So come learn what all work is happening.
Hell yeah. No, that's fantastic. Andrew, I want to throw the same question to you. Is there anything else that's like close to your heart that you wanted to shout out that is happening right now in Denver DSA?
I think Claire covered most of it. Having been like elected in national leadership, that's like pulled a little bit more of my attention. But like internationalism is like where I have done a majority of my organizing, but I will just highlight some like other things that are like happening in Denver DSA. Like we do have like a political education committee where if like you are just like more, like I mentioned, like being curious about socialism, etc., like that's where people get together. Many committees have like reading groups, but political education is more so like kind of getting into the like theory that helps inform the organizing we do, because I think when you hold those two like in tandem, that's how we're like so much more successful in like achieving the ends that we're fighting for. And I know our electoral committee is looking forward to supporting 2 ballot initiatives, which that's where a lot of like Denver DSA has been a little bit more successful in our like interventions with ballot initiatives. We've ran campaigns like whole cloth out of Denver DSA to like try and like create some reforms to make everyone's lives like a little bit easier to exist under while we like continue to organize for a better world. But 2 propositions, LLMM, which are pretty much just like filling the stopgap in funding from the Trump administration to support our like healthy meals program that we have in Colorado that ensures like we have like universal free lunch program for kids in school. And so we're helping out on that, which is really like an area to some degree. There's a good deal of people that like join DSA and are just like looking for something to do. So like join, it's pretty easy to join. You just have to like go to the join DSA link. I'll try and find it, or we can post it in the show notes. But pretty easy to join. Go to a committee. I know how I got my start is I went to a few committees and like found a place to plug in where they're just like asking like, hey, do you want to do something? So there's always opportunities to do that in like internationalism, labor, electoral, etc. And I will say like me specifically, something that I hope to see and hope to be able to contribute to a little bit more in Denver DSA is like it being a home where like if you're frustrated with your workplace, like don't leave, organize it. We need a like strong militant labor movement in this country to be able to achieve things like the dock workers were able to in Italy. So try and organize your workplace. It is like not as difficult as it may seem. And that's kind of like the bread and butter of socialist organizing is organizing your workplace. And Denver DSA's labor committee helps out a fair bit with connecting people with organizers to try and organize their workplace. And that's something that I hope to be able to contribute to more. But like I said, it's super easy to join DSA, dsausa.org/join, and then you'll be put in contact with like your local chapter. And if you don't have a chapter in your area, I'm sure people in your local area are like more than willing to like help you form like an organizing committee to try and build a new chapter if there is kind of a vacuum in your area.
Yeah, and the one thing I want to add there, when you are deciding where to show up, I really recommend starting out with a little bit of work. Like, do something. You will feel better for one thing, and you'll be helping. Even if it seems really small or trivial or even non-political, like calling through a list of people to turn them out to the next meeting, or folding a bunch of zines or flyering some area. These are those things will first of all help you meet people, and they will also help you like feel what it is to actually do organizing work. And like for me, that was like the thing. Like I basically showed up, didn't really know anything about socialism, learned as much as I could, knocked the doors that I was told to knock, and like that was how I met people and gained what certainly to me feels like a lot more clarity than I had going into DSA.
Awesome. It's so great to hear about all of the stuff that is happening. And yeah, I know that there is stuff that we did not even touch on. I know just randomly the feminist socialist or socialist feminist committee is doing some work. I know they've like put together care packages for people having abortions in the past. And so that's like another committee I think that we did not shout out, but guaranteed whatever you want to do, there is a place for you to plug in and do it and meet like-minded people. And yeah, it really can't be said enough how great it is to just be amongst people who do believe that a better world is possible and want to make it happen. We're all kind of surrounded. I don't know about you guys, but I'm surrounded by a lot of kind of like nihilistic, apathetic libs that are like, well, the country's descending into fascism. I guess we'll just, keep buying our treats and, wait for it to happen. So if you don't like the sound of that, there are, over 1,000 other people in Denver who also don't like the sound of that and want to like actually do something about it. So come join us.
Yeah, and the antidote to hope the antidote to despair isn't hope, actually. Hope is still something that you do sitting alone in your house. It's action. Action is what makes you not despair. That's like the solution to nihilism. Right.
Yes, I can personally attest to that. If all you do is, go to the storage unit and get some tables and chairs out before an event and help people set up and break down, it will help you feel better. So do it. Okay, so this is maybe medium spicy question. It's like white people spicy. Last week, or was it last week? I don't know what is time. We spoke with Ben, who is a member of the Denver Communists. And I'm sure you guys are aware, the Denver Communists kind of have a reputation in Denver for not being very collaborative with other leftist orgs. And we did somewhat hold his feet to the fire about that and ask about that. And, he said that they would be open to doing more collaborations. But so I am just curious, kind of, if you are willing to share, what do you think about the possibility of collaborating with the Denver Communists, or just what is your opinion about them in general?
So I guess I'll start with like my whole deal is collaborating with other organizations on the left. Like the Colorado Palestine Coalition is where I've poured my whole heart and soul for the last 2 years, and I wouldn't take any of it back. The organizations that compose that are like incredible, and they're all very different, right? Like there are organizations that I wouldn't want to be like a member of just because the specific ideological tendency doesn't really work for me, but the collaboration is itself worth it. And I think like both within Denver DSA, like I would hate to see some kind of like, specific ideological hegemony in Denver DSA. I think like it's actually really healthy to have lots of different voices coming at the problem from different angles, which I think is like part of, I guess, what I would call a criticism of Denver Communists. Like, I think like single tendency is just sort of played out. We've seen what it's like for there to be trot organizations. What happens is they get to a certain size and then there's a horrible scandal and then they split and then one of them claims to be the real descendant and the other one claims it's just, I don't know how many more times we have to do this. And then I like my own personal experience. Like I have tried very, very hard to work directly with Denver Communists as an individual and through DSA, and it's just impossible. And the reason is because they don't believe in a united front. And that is like, if I have anything that I'm like totally gung ho about, it is the united front. I don't believe in publicly bashing other organizations, and like this is as close as I'm willing to get to that. I realize I'm kind of speaking in a little bit of a hypocrisy here, but like I think that like the last time I collaborated with the Denver Communists, I basically was just called out on Instagram for not doing it perfect. And I just don't believe in that crap. I think it's really unhealthy. I think that conflict is very healthy, and I think that it should be done sort of as locally as possible to the source of the conflict, right? I think that people should hash their issues out, and then, you know, when we're talking in front of the Democrats, we should have a united front as leftists, and that's a pretty strong belief of mine, and it's very explicitly not a belief of theirs, and you know that's totally fine. But I have found it essentially impossible to collaborate with them, unfortunately.
Yeah, I would just add that I don't really know much about the Denver Communists. They don't really consume a whole lot of space in my head. I don't think about them really at all. But I know early on when I was in Denver DSA and I was on steering, I think back in 2022, we had tried to make amends with them to some degree, and they just weren't really willing to operate as good faith coalition partners on shared common goals. So it just wasn't much used to that. And similarly to Claire, my a lot of my central focus in organizing, in my approach to organizing, is organizing within coalitions, because I may disagree with some DSA members in that I don't think necessarily DSA is the one sole vehicle that is going to magically achieve socialism within my lifetime in the United States. I think ultimately approaching organizing for socialism in the United States into the belly of the beast, you have to have a pretty strong degree of humility and be able to work with other groups and not just think that the thing that you're doing is the sole thing. It has to be the sole thing and it's the most important thing. I really try and center the end goal of achieving socialism, and DSA being a vehicle for that, and the vehicle that I choose to build and be a part of. But that certainly doesn't stop me from being willing to work with other groups and organizations, community orgs that may not necessarily have a full socialist lens to them, because I'm also willing to try and work to educate people as to why I think socialism is the best approach, humanitarian approach to structure society, as well as a willingness to work with other socialist organizations under the banner of Claire mentioned, of a united front, of we kind of vaguely want the same thing, which is socialism in the United States. We may disagree a little bit on how to get there, and what's the best path to get there and what it looks like once we do get there. But the one thing that we do share a common understanding for is the current fascistic tendencies that we see today from the Trump administration does put a lot of communities under threat, and that we need to be united against that and fighting against that. And that sure, we can share critique internally to each other, but we have to have a very strong face on the outside.
Okay.
Awesome.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you both so much for your time. You've been exceedingly generous with it, and we do sincerely appreciate it. You all both mentioned, the kind of links that we'll drop in the show notes and the kind of the best ways to get involved. But just, if people do want to learn more about DSA, if they want to get involved, if they want to join, what's the best kind of first/next step for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most the easiest and sort of more passive way, follow everybody on Instagram. DSA Denver on Instagram. DSA's national account is probably just at DSA. But I think the more active you can be, the better. So I would advise you to just go to something. We have new member orientations every other week. We have committee meetings that you can just come and see what's going on. All over the calendar. So denverdsa.org/events, I think, is the most important link, because doing is gonna help you think better. Thinking before doing too much, I think, is kind of paralyzing. So obviously, we need to do praxis and theory in concert. But I think getting your feet on the ground is the fastest way to helping. So please, yeah, come out to any event, any protest, any demonstration, any craft event. Like Socialist Feminist Committee has a craft event every couple weeks. Anything at all where you can get into community with us, we'd love to have you.
Lovely, fantastic. Well, guys, sincerely, thank you both so much for your time. This was a fantastic conversation, and I'm sure we'll see you guys out there.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot for having us.
Thanks so much for having us.
All right, thank you once again to Claire and Andrew for a fantastic interview. I had a great time talking with them, learning more about DSA. I would strongly encourage anyone who is not already involved in DSA and who may be considering it to get involved post haste, because it really is a great organization doing a lot of really interesting stuff. And also, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, all of that good stuff. And if you know anyone who is interested in being interviewed, or know any organizations who would like to be interviewed themselves, please don't hesitate to give us a shout. See you guys out there.